I was widely recognized as the most talented jewelry designer in the industry. Yet in my own marriage, I was treated like a complete idiot who didn't understand a thing. While they used my designs to promote their perfect wedding campaigns, they were lying in my own bed discussing how to build a counterfeit empire by stepping over me. Miriam had no idea that the iPad she deemed secure and the phone she brought into the shower with its complex passcode had already synced every message, every moan, and every recording of her calling out the wrong man's name directly to me. I had even compiled every latest sketch she forwarded to Marcus Sterling and every excited message claiming their plan was nearly a success into an airtight chain of evidence. I was waiting for the night of our company's 20th anniversary gala to slice open this rotten core of so-called love in front of the entire industry and media. I wanted everyone to see what the man they mocked as an idealistic fool, was truly capable of achieving. That night in Chicago should have been as mundane as any other. I was alone in my studio, staring at the monitor, meticulously adjusting the fine details of my latest engagement ring design. As a relatively well-known jewelry designer, I always invested more passion into wedding rings than my other pieces because I believed every couple deserved a symbol as unique as their own story. My phone buzzed with an iMessage from my wife, Miriam. She wrote that she had a client dinner and told me not to wait up. I glanced at the clock on the wall and saw it was already 9 o'clock, noting that this was the 4th time this month she had been out late. Ever since her promotion to brand director, the number of client meetings she attended had become suspiciously frequent. I sent a quick reply telling her to stay safe and went back to my work until the pixels on the screen began to blur before my eyes. I realized it was already 1 in the morning. As I was packing up to leave the studio, I remembered that her iPad was still tucked in the corner of the sofa. She had stopped by for lunch earlier that day and accidentally left it behind. Once I got home to our apartment, I intended to place the iPad on her vanity. Just as I reached down, the screen suddenly flickered to life with a new notification. The sender was saved under the contact name, My Deepest Love. My hand froze in midair because that was never a name she used for me. Since our wedding day, she had only ever called me Edward or Darling. The message preview was only 1 line long. It read, "Baby, I can still taste you," and the rest of the text was cut off by the system. I stood there in the shadows of our bedroom, feeling as though my feet were nailed to the floor. That brief moment stretched out indefinitely, making it feel as if an entire century had passed. I eventually brought myself to tap on the thread, and in that exact heartbeat, my entire world shattered into pieces. The iMessage window was filled with a long string of filthy flirtations and dozens of intimate photos, plus several graphic videos that were absolutely revolting to witness. The man on the other end of those messages was our most prominent client, the head of Thorn Jewels CEO Marcus Sterling. This was the same Marcus Sterling who shook my hand at every gallery opening, clapped me on the back, and constantly showered me with hollow praise about being the most gifted designer he had ever encountered. Now the screen displayed a different reality where he told her that her idealistic husband had no clue what kind of woman she actually was. He wrote that once their plan succeeded, she could finally dump me for good. He called her the most perfect thing he had ever possessed in his life. I scrolled up relentlessly, reading through months of history as every word twisted like a blade in my chest. This affair had been going on for over half a year, and every detail was now being dragged into the light. During the weeks I was away on business trips to New York, this man had been making himself at home in my house and defiling my marriage in our own bed. What truly made my skin crawl was the content that followed those initial messages. Buried between the heavy breathing and the filth was a chilling current of mockery and contempt that was directed entirely at me. Marcus asked her if she knew what the most pathetic thing about me was, mocking my constant talk of artistic vision and craftsmanship while claiming I had no grasp of the market. Miriam replied by telling him not to even bring it up, asserting that any random design from another firm was better than mine and that she was the only reason I was still in business. Marcus told her to relax because once their plan went into effect, that idiot would finally realize how foolish he had been. I closed the iPad and placed it back on the vanity with trembling hands before retreating to the master bathroom. I turned on the faucet and splashed freezing water over my face to numb the shock. The man staring back from the mirror was ghostly pale but unnervingly calm. I locked eyes with my reflection for what felt like an eternity. Eventually, the distinct click of the front door lock echoed through the apartment, and she walked in, bringing a heavy scent of alcohol with her. There was also the lingering scent of another man's cologne clinging to her skin. Miriam saw me in the bathroom and immediately put on that high-pitched, playful voice, asking why I was still awake. She told me it was late and that I really needed to get some sleep. I dried my face with a towel and turned to face her. I told her I had just finished up some work and asked if she she had a good time. She groaned and buried her head in my chest, complaining about how much the executives could drink and how hard it was for her to get away. Her eyelashes were damp, and I couldn't tell if it was from the alcohol or something else entirely. I leaned in closer and caught a sharp, pungent scent of cologne that definitely did not belong to me. I took a step back and told her to go take a shower and get to bed early. She nodded and grabbed her silk robe before heading into the bathroom. As soon as I heard the water running, I grabbed my phone from the nightstand and fired off a message to a contact of mine. I told him to look into Marcus Sterling of Sterling Jewels and to send me every piece of dirt he could find. Since both of them thought I was just some dreamy, idealistic fool, I decided to lean into that role. I would keep playing the idiot until the day I burned their entire world to the ground. From that moment on, I began to monitor every single move Miriam made. The small details I used to ignore now served as blatant reminders of her infidelity. She suddenly started wearing a new, heavy fragrance that smelled incredibly expensive. When I mentioned it, she claimed a friend had given it to her, but I knew that specific bottle retailed for over $500, and none of her social circle had that kind of money. Her wardrobe was becoming increasingly high-end, and she would spend nearly 2 hours primping in front of the mirror every morning. Back when she was actually trying for me, she barely bothered with foundation. Now, she never left her phone unattended, and she even started taking it into the bathroom with her while she showered. It was as if she was terrified that I would snatch it up the moment she put it down. All these little signs merged into an undeniable reality that left a hollow ache in my chest. I started following her, and it didn't take long before I captured photos of her and Marcus Sterling at the St. Regis in Midtown. It was a gray, rainy afternoon at exactly 3 o'clock when she stepped out of a cab with a black umbrella. She was wearing a brand new Chanel suit and towering stilettos as she walked into the hotel lobby. Marcus was already there waiting, and they shared a brief hug and a kiss before disappearing into the elevator together. I sat in a small cafe across the street with a cup of coffee that had long since gone cold while my eyes remained fixed on the hotel entrance. My mind was flooded with memories of our life together. We had first met at a jewelry trade show when she was just a fresh college graduate working as an intern. I was already making a name for myself in the industry back then. She told me how much she admired my design philosophy, and I was completely captivated by the raw, fiery passion in her eyes. Eventually, we fell in love and got married, building our business together from the ground up. We fought hard to carve out a space for ourselves in the cutthroat world of luxury jewelry. When she finally landed the brand director position last year, I celebrated by spending 3 months handcrafting a one-of-a-kind sapphire necklace just for her. The day I gave it to her, she put it on and kissed me, promising that I would always be the love of her life. Now, that very same necklace was resting against her skin as she walked straight into the arms of another man. I clutched my chest, trying to soothe the dull, heavy ache growing there. I couldn't tell if the bitterness was from the cold coffee or the betrayal. My vision started to blur, but I refused to look away from the hotel entrance, watching everything like a living security camera. I had to understand exactly how deep the rot went. A week later, I followed her to the same hotel once more. This time, however, I'd already gone ahead of them and tucked hidden cameras inside the penthouse suite. The live feed streamed directly to my phone as I sat in my usual spot at the cafe downstairs. I couldn't take my eyes off the screen as I watched Miriam curl up in Marcus Sterling's arms, their bodies pressed together on the hotel bed. She looked up and asked him if he was certain I didn't know anything. Marcus tightened his grip on her waist and told her to relax. His voice was dripping with condescension as he said that people like me lived in ivory towers, pretending to be great artists while the world passed them by. He laughed, saying my head was so far up my own ass that I wouldn't notice if she was sleeping with half of Manhattan right in front of me. Miriam laughed along with him, agreeing that I only cared about my shiny stones and never even noticed when she bought a new dress. Marcus noted that she had been playing me for years, and his hand began to wander lower as he asked when they could finally go public with their relationship. Her voice took on a sickeningly sweet tone as she told him it would be soon. She said as soon as their plan was finalized, they would be free. I tapped the screen and shut off the video feed. This wasn't just a simple affair anymore. They were conspiring to do something far more damaging. As our primary client, Sterling Jewels placed orders worth tens of millions every year. Meanwhile, Miriam had access to every piece of sensitive data our firm owned. I stood up and walked out into the cool New York drizzle. The rain started to soak into my blazer, but it did nothing to extinguish the rage burning in my chest. If they wanted to believe I was just some idiot who played with rocks all day, I was happy to accommodate them. I would keep playing my part and wait to see who would be laughing when the dust settled. Once I got home, I began meticulously setting the stage for my response. I started by installing discrete cameras in every corner of the house. I wired the living room, the study, and even her favorite spot of the vanity because I wanted a record of every lie and every single moment of her betrayal. While she was asleep, I secretly installed tracking software on her phone. Every call log and iMessage she sent was mirrored directly to my device. Over the following few days, I witnessed things that were far more disgusting than anything I had previously imagined. Whenever I worked late, she would bring Marcus right into our home and into our bed. She would even wear the sapphire necklace I made her to tease him, whispering into her phone that it was a custom piece no one else could buy while telling him how much she missed him. I would be sitting in the study just one room away, hearing every single word they said. The thing that made me truly nauseous was watching her take photos of my latest design sketches and sending them to Marcus. She told him it was my newest concept and suggested his team could find a way to use it. It wasn't enough for them to destroy my marriage. They were actively trying to end my career as well. I forced myself to watch every second of the footage, even though each frame felt like a razor blade slicing through my heart. I didn't look away because I knew I had to endure this until the right moment arrived to sink them both. The perfect opportunity presented itself sooner than I expected. The countdown for our company's 20th anniversary gala had begun. The centerpiece of the evening was going to be a major jewelry design competition where the winning piece would be crowned the signature design of the year. The winner would receive a massive marketing push with an unlimited budget, and the judging panel consisted of the most respected names in the industry. As the creative director, the competition fell under my jurisdiction. Miriam, meanwhile, was responsible for coordinating the logistics of the entire gala. It wasn't until yesterday that I finally uncovered the full extent of their scheme. For years, Marcus had been running an illicit overseas production line to mass-produce counterfeits of my designs. He had been selling them through various back channels for a fraction of the price and pocketing a massive fortune. Miriam was his mole on the inside, systematically leaking every one of my sketches to him. She had even handed over my most valuable, unreleased core concepts directly into his hands. The most outrageous part was their plan to rig the anniversary competition so a designer from one of Marcus's shell companies would take the top prize. This would give his counterfeit operation the legitimacy it needed to move into the high-end market. I stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, watching the endless stream of headlights moving through the streets of Manhattan. The city was glowing like a sea of stars under the night sky, but my own world had already been plunged into a darkness that felt like it would never end. If they wanted to put on a show at the gala, I was more than happy to provide the grand finale. Preparations for the anniversary were moving at full speed, and Miriam started staying at the office until late every single night. I knew perfectly well she was spending that time plotting with Marcus, but I continued to play the role of the devoted, oblivious husband. I made sure dinner was ready whenever she got home, serving her favorite meals and making a show of asking her how her day had been. She would lean into me with a voice that was sweet enough to be poisonous, telling me how wonderful I was for taking such good care of her. Then, while my head was down as I ate, she would be under the table sending messages to Marcus. She would type out messages telling Marcus how she was already thinking about him again right after finishing dinner. Meanwhile, I was busy making my own calls, reaching out to everyone from high-profile fashion bloggers to investigative reporters at the Wall Street Journal to set up private meetings. I provided these contacts with detailed off-the-record briefings, laying out the entire timeline and the evidence I had gathered. At the same time, I hired a private investigator specifically to dig into the details of Marcus's manufacturing operations abroad. It didn't take long to assemble an airtight chain of evidence. I had proof of the stolen designs along with a mountain of data regarding their counterfeit production lines and distribution networks. Most importantly, my investigator tracked down their offshore bank accounts and the flow of funds connecting everything. With only 10 days left until the gala, I sat at my desk and went over my revenge plan again and again, polishing every detail until it was perfect. Occasionally, Miriam would sneak up behind me and wrap her arms around my shoulders, asking what I was so busy with. I would instantly switch the windows on my screen and turn around with a warm smile, telling her I was just getting everything ready for the gala and that she had nothing to worry about. She gave me a light kiss on the cheek and told me she knew she could always count on me. I watched her walk out of the study and then turned back to my monitor to type the final sentence of my plan, noting that this was going to be an anniversary that no one would ever forget. 2 nights before the big event, Miriam was in an unusually good mood and insisted on cooking a full dinner for me. She even went as far as taking off the sapphire necklace and replacing it with a plain, nondescript silver chain for the evening. As she poured me a glass of wine, she told me how sorry she was that work had been keeping her so busy lately. She said she felt like she had been neglecting me and hadn't spent enough time by my side. I raised my glass and watched the deep red liquid swirl slowly against the crystal. I told her it was fine and that I understood how important the anniversary was. She gave me a playful wink and a smug little smile, telling me that she had prepared a massive surprise for me on the night of the gala. I feigned excitement and asked her what the surprise was. She told me she couldn't reveal it yet, but asked me to promise her that no matter what happened that night, I would trust her completely. I nodded and told her that of course I would always trust her. She smiled as if she had already conquered the world, likely imagining the entire industry applauding her and Marcus for their brilliant maneuvers. In her mind, I was just the clueless husband who would stand by her side and keep supporting her. She had absolutely no idea that I had prepared a special gift of my own for them that night. The night of the anniversary gala finally arrived. The ballroom was draped in gold and crystal chandeliers hung like shimmering waterfalls over the crowd. Champagne bubbled in every glass as nearly every major figure in the jewelry world filled the room. I stood at the back of the room watching Miriam on stage in a stunning evening gown as she gave the opening remarks. The sapphire necklace was back around her neck, gleaming brilliantly under the harsh spotlights. Marcus Sterling was seated right in the front row, frequently exchanging knowing glances with my wife. When he caught my eye, he actually had the nerve to wave enthusiastically and tell me that tonight was my big night and that he couldn't wait to see the final results. I smiled and nodded back at him while I waited for the real show to begin. Eventually, the time came to announce the winner of the design competition. Miriam stood at the center of the stage, holding the envelope, drawing out the suspense as long as she could. She began to announce the grand prize winner when I stood up from my seat and called for a moment of everyone's time. I walked straight toward the stage as the entire room turned to look at me. Miriam looked stunned and asked me what I was doing. I told her it was nothing and took the microphone from her hand. I addressed the crowd, telling them I simply wanted to share something interesting with everyone. I snapped my fingers and a massive LED screen behind us suddenly flared to life. The video started playing high-definition footage of them together in our bedroom, followed by clips of their tryst in her office and the disgusting scenes from the hotel suite. Then the display shifted to show the complete chain of evidence I had compiled. The screen showed undercover footage of Marcus's counterfeit factories, travel records, shipping manifests, and pages of offshore bank statements. In the dead silence of the room, I said that since it was an anniversary gala, everyone deserved a genuine surprise. The color drained from Miriam's face instantly, and the envelope slipped from her fingers, fluttering to the floor like a dead leaf. But what terrified her even more than the video was the sight of police officers and federal agents emerging from every exit in the ballroom. They moved in quickly and surrounded the stage. One of the agents flashed his badge at Marcus and informed him that he was being arrested for conspiracy to commit wire fraud and large-scale trafficking of counterfeit goods. Marcus's face twisted into a mask of rage as he screamed at me, asking how I dared to do this. I gave him a cold smile and told him that I wasn't just daring to do it, I was making sure the entire world knew exactly what kind of people they were. The reporters I had invited swarmed the front of the stage, their camera flashes turning the room into a strobe light nightmare. On the giant screen, the video continued to loop in a silent but deadly display that pinned their filth in front of every single person in the room. Reporters began shouting questions at Miriam, asking about her relationship with Marcus Sterling and how our company's designs had been leaked. They asked if it was true that Sterling Jewels' entire high-end collection was nothing more than pirated versions of my work. Miriam was shaking uncontrollably, her tears smearing her expensive makeup across her face as she struggled to find any words. She looked at me with eyes full of shock and panic, stammering to ask when I had found out. I finished the question for her, telling her I found out right around the time she decided I was stupid enough to keep believing her lies. The ballroom descended into total chaos as Marcus fought against the federal agents who were pinning his arms back to handcuff him. He kept screaming that they couldn't do this to the CEO of Sterling Jewels. I walked over to him and leaned in close, whispering that I hoped he enjoyed his time in federal prison and warned him to be careful in the showers. Miriam collapsed onto the floor of the stage as the powerful professional image she had spent years building shattered into pieces. She lunged forward and grabbed the hem of my trousers, begging me for a chance to explain myself, but I simply kicked her hand away. I asked her what there was to explain, whether she wanted to explain the betrayal or their plan to ruin my life and career. She sobbed hysterically, claiming that wasn't how it was and insisting that she had really loved me. I looked down at her and told her that her claim of love was pathetic, especially since she called out Marcus's name in her sleep. A wave of hushed whispers broke out through the crowd as people expressed their shock at her true character. Others remarked on how they had always thought she was so sophisticated and professional, only to realize she was a snake. They expressed their pity for me for having married such a woman. By the next morning, the scandal had had exploded across the internet and dominated the front pages of every major news outlet. Headlines screamed about luxury directors involved in corporate espionage and the arrest of Marcus Sterling for his counterfeit empire. Miriam was fired immediately, and her name was permanently blacklisted by every reputable brand in the industry. She was too terrified to even leave the house and spent all her time calling and texting me for forgiveness. She sent message after message claiming she knew she was wrong and begging for another chance, saying she couldn't survive without me. I didn't respond to a single one of her pleas. Word soon reached me that Marcus was falling apart in prison and was desperately asking me to drop the lawsuit at any cost. I had my lawyer send back a 2-word response: absolutely not. This was only the beginning of my retribution. The investigation continued to peel back the layers of Sterling Jewels' counterfeit operations, revealing that the total amount involved in the fraud exceeded $100 million. A growing number of executives and designers were being swept up in the probe. As a key witness, Miriam was forced to visit the police station for questioning every single day. When I saw her outside the station one afternoon, she looked like a completely different person. The designer clothes and perfect makeup were gone, replaced by deep dark circles under her eyes and a permanent look of exhaustion and fear. The moment she spotted me, she tried to run toward me while calling my name. I didn't even turn my head as I climbed into my car and drove away. In the rearview mirror, I saw her collapse on her knees on the sidewalk, sobbing so hard she could barely breathe. I returned to our apartment, which was now nothing more than an empty shell. I began the process of packing up her belongings, including her clothes, shoes, and makeup. The last thing I picked up was that sapphire necklace. The police had considered taking it as evidence, but I told them it was just a personal gift and had nothing to do with the criminal case. I took the necklace out to the balcony and, without a second thought, hurled it down onto the stone pavement below. It hit the ground with a sharp crack, mirroring the way the last of my feelings for her had finally shattered into nothing. Miriam's parents eventually showed up at my door. Her mother had red, swollen eyes as she pleaded with me to forgive her daughter just this once. She sobbed that Miriam truly understood the weight of her mistakes. I looked at them with zero emotion and asked if they really expected me to forgive her just so she could find another chance to humiliate me. I told them they had done a spectacular job raising her to be this way and asked how they could possibly have the nerve to beg for mercy now. Her father tried to take a humble tone, suggesting that they would keep a close eye on her and that we were both young enough to start over. I cut him off mid-sentence and told them both to get out before I had to repeat myself. As I watched them walk away in shame, I lit a cigarette and found myself remembering our wedding day. Back then, they had told everyone who would listen that I was the best son-in-law they could have asked for. The irony was suffocating. Every day after that, Miriam could be found loitering outside my apartment. She stood there regardless of the weather, sometimes for the entire day. Whenever I returned home, I treated her like she was invisible, walking right past her without even a sideways glance. One evening, I arrived home to find her collapsed on the sidewalk. At the hospital, the doctors informed me that she hadn't eaten a single thing in 3 days. The doctor pulled me aside in the hallway and told me that my wife needed someone to look after her. I turned to leave immediately, telling the doctor that she wasn't my wife and that she wouldn't be for much longer. The following day, I walked into her hospital room and tossed the divorce papers onto her bed, demanding that she sign them. Her hand was shaking so violently that her tears began to smear the ink on the page. When she tried to call me Edward, I told her in a flat, cold voice to never use that name again because she didn't deserve to. The moment the signature was on the paper, I turned and walked out of the room. I could hear her screaming apologies behind me, but I didn't look back. On the day of the sentencing, the courtroom was packed to capacity. Marcus decided to plead guilty and beg the judge for leniency, claiming that everything had just been a momentary lapse in judgment. Miriam was called to the stand as a witness, looking like a hollow shell of her former self. She stood in the witness box with a voice so hoarse I could barely make out her words as she repeated how much she regretted her actions. I sat in the gallery with a stony expression and listened to every single word. In the end, Marcus was sentenced to 10 years in federal prison and hit with a $50 million fine. Miriam managed to avoid criminal charges by cooperating with the investigation, but the court ordered her to pay $30 million in civil damages to my firm. As the bailiffs led Marcus away, he turned and screamed at me that I would pay and that he would get his revenge. I just gave him a small smile and told him I would be waiting to see him in 10 years. After the proceedings ended, Miriam rushed over and blocked my path. She dropped to her knees right there in the courthouse and clung to my leg, begging for one more chance. She sobbed that she would do anything and pay any price I asked for. A crowd began to gather and whisper around us. I heard someone recognize her as the director from the scandal and remark that it was far too late for her to be begging for forgiveness. I let let her hold on to me, but kept my voice devoid of any warmth as I asked what she possibly had left to offer. I pointed out that she had already given everything to Marcus and asked why she was coming to me now to play the victim. She looked up at me through her tears and offered to give me every single asset she still owned. I let out a short, mocking laugh and told her that we both knew exactly how she had acquired that money in the first place. I leaned down toward her and whispered that she was delusional if she thought any of this had ever been about the money. I jerked my leg free from her grasp and walked out of the courthouse without looking back. I could hear her calling my name and begging as I walked away, but her voice was quickly swallowed up by the roar of the city traffic. Back at the office, the fallout from the scandal was still spreading through the industry. The video from the gala had gone viral, and the hashtag #BillionaireBetrayal trended for weeks. Public opinion was almost entirely unanimous in saying that Miriam got exactly what she deserved and that a woman like her needed to pay the price. People online questioned why she was acting so pitiful now when she clearly hadn't felt an ounce of regret before she was caught. Most people sided with me, saying it was incredibly satisfying to see those two finally brought down. Inside the company, the gossip was constant. Every time I walked through the halls, I could feel my colleagues watching me with a mix of pity and a new sense of profound respect. None of them had ever suspected that their quiet, soft-spoken creative director was capable of such a swift and devastating counterattack. I buried myself in my studio, pouring all of my energy into a brand new collection. My assistant knocked tentatively on the door to tell me there were reporters waiting outside, but I didn't even look up as I told her I wasn't seeing anyone and to send them away immediately. The only thing I cared about now was my work and my designs. Everything else was just background noise to a story that was still unfolding. A month later, Sterling Jewels officially filed for bankruptcy because their brand reputation had been completely obliterated by the scandal. There was no way for them to ever recover in this industry. I heard that Marcus had suffered a complete mental breakdown in prison and even attempted to take his own life, only to be stopped by a guard at the last second. Meanwhile, I moved in and captured most of the market share they had left behind. The president of the American Jewelry Association came to see me in person to offer me the position of vice president. He told me that the way I handled the situation had earned me the respect of the entire industry. I politely declined the offer, explaining that I prefer to focus my time on my creative work. He was telling me I was being too humble when my assistant knocked again. She told me my ex-wife was back, and without looking up from my sketches, I told her to have security escort Miriam out of the building. My assistant hesitated, saying Miriam threatened to kneel on the sidewalk and stay there until I agreed to see her. I let out a cold laugh and told her to let her kneel as long as she wanted. The association president gave me a long, complicated look. He looked like he wanted to offer some advice, but he thought better of it and simply whispered that everything should be done in moderation. I put my pen down and looked out the window. She was actually down there, kneeling on the cold concrete. The cold wind was whipping at her thin jacket, and she looked so gaunt it was frightening. Passers-by were stopping to point and stare, but she remained perfectly still as if she had turned into a statue. My assistant tried to speak again, but I told both of them to leave immediately. Once the office was quiet, I picked up my phone and opened the monitoring software I had installed so long ago. All the records were still there, including the nauseating conversation she had with Marcus. I reread the messages where they mocked me for only knowing how to draw pretty pictures and promised each other the world once their plan succeeded. Now that she was kneeling on the sidewalk, I wondered where all that supposed love had gone. I wondered why she hadn't considered loyalty when she was busy stabbing me to death. She ended up staying down there for 3 whole days. On the first day, it poured rain, and she stayed there soaked to the bone until midnight. On the second day, the sun was brutal, and she nearly passed out from the heat. By the third day, a biting wind had swept through the city, leaving her lips a sickly shade of blue. During those 3 days, I walked past her every morning and evening without ever acknowledging her existence. On the morning of the 4th day, security called to tell me that my ex-wife had fainted during the night and had been taken to the hospital. I told them I got the message and hung up before opening my laptop and pouring myself a fresh cup of coffee. My assistant came in and nervously asked if I was planning on going to bed. I told her no and turned my attention back to my work, noting that Miriam wasn't going to die. The office was so quiet I could hear a pin drop, but I remained perfectly composed and even felt a strange sense of peace. Once someone chooses to betray me, no amount of crying or repenting can change what they do. Traitors don't deserve forgiveness. Not now, not ever. A few days later, she finally stopped showing up at the office. I watched from my window as she turned away from the building for the last time, her silhouette looking fragile and lonely. Her steps were heavy, as if the weight of the future she had destroyed was physically crushing her. I couldn't help but think how truly pathetic she looked. I looked past her toward the Manhattan skyline, my mind already moving on to the next chapter of my life. Now that I had finally cut away the run, I knew it wouldn't be long before I could truly start over. I had to admit that while the betrayal had nearly destroyed me, it had also been a gift in disguise. It was a baptism by fire that left me stronger, and I knew that from here on out, my life would only get better. Betrayal is never something that happens all at once. It unfolds slowly, starting from the very first hidden thought and growing when the first lie goes unpunished. Eventually, it becomes a habit where one person simply takes the other's trust away. Edward won his battle in this story. He won so decisively that his revenge could be described as nothing short of perfect. However, by the end of the narrative, a troubling realization emerges because he didn't actually find happiness in his victory. Every frame captured by his hidden cameras, every link in his evidence chain, and every explosive video shown at the gala allowed him to settle the score. Yet, none of those things could help him rediscover the man he used to be, the one who genuinely believed in love and sympathy. He won the war, but lost the very last spark of hope he held for anything beautiful. This is a dilemma that any of us might face when we're deeply hurt. We have to choose between letting hatred turn us cold like those who have harmed us, or choosing to build something even more powerful on top of it. Forgiveness is never a sign of weakness. In many cases, true strength is shown when you see someone for exactly who they are and take the necessary steps to protect your own rights. You then choose to let go and move forward instead of living forever in the exact moment of their betrayal. This story serves as a reminder that if you have people in your life worth cherishing, you should not wait until they are gone to realize the immense weight of trust. Trust is much like a mirror because once it is broken, it stays broken. Even if you manage to glue the pieces back together, the cracks will remain visible for the rest of the time. If you're currently suffering through the pain of being betrayed, please remember that you are allowed to be angry and you are allowed to fight back. However, you must not let the pursuit of revenge become the sole purpose of your existence. If you do that, you are essentially using someone else's mistakes to lock yourself inside an invisible cage. True liberation does not come from watching your enemy fall, but from the moment you can finally walk toward your own future without ever looking back. Take care of yourself and keep moving forward. Never look back at the shadows of the past.